All right, so we've got a ton of research here on Gen Z and how they feel about the working world, their whole deal with work.
Yeah.
It seems like we're really trying to figure out what makes this generation tick, like how they view work, what they look for in a job, that kind of thing.
Definitely a deep dive.
Get ready to maybe rethink some stereotypes, because I think this is going to be interesting.
For sure. Yeah, the goal here isn't to just scratch the surface, right?
Right.
We're going beyond just the headlines about Gen Z being glued to their phones all the time and really trying to understand, the why behind their decisions, what really motivates them.
Well, and speaking of assumptions, I got to admit, when I read that little anecdote in Gen Z Explained
Mm-hmm.
about the professor's kids who refused to go grocery shopping unless their outfits were perfectly coordinated,
Right.
I may have chuckled a little bit myself.
Yeah.
It just made me wonder, are we too quick to just label them as image obsessed, or is there something more there?
That's a perfect example of how those sort of surface level observations can be misleading.
Yeah.
Generations and the Gen Z frequency both kind of paint a different picture of this generation,
Yeah.
which is that they're actually incredibly pragmatic, and a lot of that is tied to the realities of what they've seen growing up economically. They've seen the struggles, the instability, maybe even experienced it firsthand,
Right.
and it makes them hesitant to repeat those patterns.
So it's less about being glued to their phones and more about being glued to the idea of a secure future.
Totally. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Because if you think about it, delaying traditional milestones like home ownership or even marriage, that is a form of risk management for them. They're playing the long game. They're prioritizing stability in a world that feels anything but stable.
Yeah.
And marketing to Gen Z highlights, how resourceful they are.
Right.
They're turning to side hustles, freelancing, entrepreneurship. They're crafting their own paths instead of just relying on, that traditional corporate ladder.
Interesting. It's fascinating.
You mentioned playing the long game, and I do want to get into this whole slow life strategy thing.
Yeah.
Because generations really dives into that, and that feels almost counterintuitive in our fast-paced world.
Yeah.
So break that down for me. How does that actually look? How does that manifest in how Gen Z is approaching work? Well, that's the thing. Slow life doesn't necessarily mean that they lack ambition or drive or anything like that. It's more about a recalibration of priorities.
Okay.
So remember how we were just talking about how they're delaying these traditional milestones?
Right.
Generations suggest that slower pace is reflected in their careers too.
Okay.
They're not just chasing the next promotion or a corner office, right? They're thinking about burnout. They're thinking about mental health. They're thinking about flexibility, things that previous generations might not have prioritized so early on in their careers.
So they're not just entering the workforce later, they're entering with a totally different mindset.
Yes.
It's less about climbing this predefined ladder and more about creating this sustainable career path that fits within their life.
You got it. It's about finding a job that complements their lifestyle, not the other way around.
Right.
They're not asking, how can I make my life fit my job? They're asking, how can I have this fulfilling life?
Right.
And, oh yeah, work also fits into that picture somewhere.
Interesting. Okay, so we've talked about how Gen Z isn't just looking for any old job.
Yeah.
Right. They want something more.
Right.
They're looking for purpose, flexibility.
Yeah.
A work environment that matches up with their values.
Yeah.
But how does that actually work in the real world? Are there companies actually doing this, not just saying they are?
Yeah, absolutely there are. The new employee contract highlights Southwest Airlines as a really good example because they've really prioritized employee well-being and building a strong company culture. And the interesting thing is they're not just surviving, they're actually thriving.
Wow.
It challenges that old idea that if you make your employees happy, it's going to hurt your bottom line.
Right, it's one or the other.
Exactly.
Interesting. So it's not this zero-sum game. You can have both.
Yeah, you can have it all.
You can have a company that values its workers and also does really well.
Right.
Which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
It actually makes me think about that point in Gen Z Explained about how Gen Z finds a sense of belonging in these very specific communities.
Right.
It's almost like they're looking for that same thing in the workplace, that same sense of belonging and shared values.
Totally. And, if you think about it,
Yeah.
Gen Z really thrives in environments where they feel valued and respected for who they are, where they can bring their authentic selves to work, you know? And they really want to see that clear link between the work they're doing and some kind of larger purpose. If they don't see that connection, if a company's not offering that, they're not afraid to walk away.
Right.
Their loyalty is with their values, not necessarily with a specific company, which is really interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And the new employee contract also talked about companies like Patagonia, who've kind of built their whole brand around strong values and being socially responsible.
Right.
And that seems to really resonate with Gen Z.
Totally, because Gen Z can spot inauthenticity like that.
Right.
You know, they can tell if you're not being genuine.
They can smell it a mile away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They want to work for companies that are truly committed to making a difference, not just doing the bare minimum for good PR.
It really makes you think, are these Gen Z values we've been talking about, are those like really specific to just them?
Yeah.
Or are we kind of seeing a bigger shift in how we all think about work in general?
That is the question, isn't it?
Right.
And here's where it gets interesting. The data from generations seems to suggest that this isn't just a Gen Z thing.
Okay.
Like, we're seeing this growing focus on things like individualism and mental well-being across all generations, really.
Interesting.
Gen Z might be the loudest about it.
Yeah, they are very vocal.
But that desire for purpose, for flexibility, for a better work-life balance, you know?
Yeah.
That's something a lot of people want.
For sure. For sure. It's almost like they're like the first generation to really like put their foot down and be like...
Yeah, like the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah, exactly. And let's not forget about technology that's had a huge impact on all of this.
Oh, absolutely.
Remote work, flexible hours, the whole gig economy thing. It's really changing how we view work.
For sure. Technology has just totally blurred the lines.
Right.
It makes those old school ways of working seem kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, like remember that whole button chair thing we talked about?
Oh, yeah, the BIC model.
Like that just doesn't fly anymore.
Nope, Gen Z knows that's not how it works.
Right, the new employee contract even mentioned this story about a Gen Z applicant who literally asked to stop working.
What?
After they had finished their tasks for the day.
Wow.
They were like, why would I just sit here?
Yeah.
They didn't get it.
Wow.
So interesting. Which leads to a thought-provoking question.
Yeah.
Instead of asking how we get Gen Z to adapt to our workplaces, shouldn't we be asking how our workplaces can adapt to this future that they're already building?
Now you're talking, this isn't about attracting young talent. This is about future-proofing how we approach work entirely.
Exactly. Because those things we talked about, like collaborative work being purpose-driven, prioritizing flexibility, employee well-being, those are trends that aren't going away anytime soon.
Exactly. Those are here to stay.
So for everyone listening, if you're feeling that pull towards curious about what the future of work looks like, don't ignore it. This conversation has hopefully given you a glimpse into how things are changing.
It's an exciting time.
And maybe spark some ideas about how you can navigate this new world of work on your own terms.